And this is your Chapter 12 Quick Hit. We'll be talking about family health issues in this. So what I want you to know from this, know what intimate partner violence is. Be able to talk about the types of intimate partner violence, physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. Know what they are, know their prevalence, know their severity, their impact on their victims. Be able to distinguish between them, who's most likely to be a perpetrator, what are some long-term effects, what are the characteristics of abuse and violent households. So what do we see in these families this is where this is prevalent? Be able to talk about those risk factors that are associated with intimate partner violence. So a couple might be, or an individual might be at higher risk to be a victim of or a perpetrator of IPV based on what? What are some risk factors? Look at table 12.1 as a hint there. Be able to talk about the cycle of domestic abuse and what that is, know what battered woman syndrome is, and the 3 phases of the cycle of domestic violence. Be able to answer the question, why do women stay? Be able to answer that as a professional. Be able to talk about the realities of being victimized by an abuser and how that impacts that person moving forward and why they might stay. You might be surprised that a lot of emotional issues like self-blame and fear and guilt are at the forefront in those incidences, which leads to maybe women staying in a situation where we might say, well, why don't you just leave? Well, maybe it's not that easy, right? Maybe it's not that easy. So know how to answer that and talk about, again, victims and effects on victims. You also need to know about child maltreatment. We're going to talk a lot about both IPV and child maltreatment in child welfare course. We will look at child maltreatment quite a bit in that course, physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, those types of maltreatment. So again, this is just kind of an overview of those things. Know what child maltreatment is, be able to talk about the different types of child maltreatment. Again, just like with IPV, know its prevalence, know the characteristics of the perpetrators, know the characteristics of the victims, be able to distinguish between physical abuse and sexual abuse, emotional abuse, those types of things. Be able to talk a little bit about mortality rates when abuse is fatal. Be able to answer the question, why do adults abuse children? So what are some risk factors that might be leading to abusive relationships between a parent and a child? And some of those things might be stress, it might be substance abuse, or it might be that there's a presence of partner violence as well, or divorce, or any combination of factors. So be able to talk about why those things might happen, be able to talk again about how abuse affects children both in the short term and the long term. Another type of violence to think about, or family health issue along the lines of violence, is sibling aggression. Be able to talk about what sibling aggression or sibling abuse is, talk about violent relationships there, and what might be happening in those families, and also be able to talk about mistreatment of our older family members, elder mistreatment or elder maltreatment, elder abuse. What is it? Who are the victims? Who are the abusers? What does it look like there? Be able to talk about who the relationship of perpetrators and victims. And again, like with all of these, why is it happening? Why is it happening? Is there some kind of substance abuse? Is there some kind of impairment of the caregiver or impairment of the recipient, the care recipient? Is it financial stress? Is it personality? Or is it a combination of a lot of different things? And then be able to talk about some of the effects, short-term and long-term, on the victim of elder abuse. There's, like with everything, there's several theoretical ways to explain violence in families, and so just be familiar with how some of these different theories might explain uh, family abuse and violence within families. Feminist theory, social learning theory, resource theory, social exchange theory, ecological systems theory, a combination or eclectic view of theory. Be able to talk about how each of those theories might explain what's happening in families where abuse is prevalent. And then also, I find probably most fascinating for many of us in our field is how we combat domestic violence. Um, be able to talk about prevention. What are ways that we can work with families to prevent this from happening, and intervention. What are ways that we can work with families where this is already happening and intervene in ways that can see a positive shift in those families. I also want you to have a good overview of some other family health issues, um, things like lifestyle choices. How does things like smoking and substance abuse affect the family when a member is engaging in one of those things? Think about things like being overweight and obesity and how that might affect a family as they are in a marriage relationship or raising children, those types of things. I can just give you my own, like, I'm very conscious of what my children eat and how they exercise and those types of things, because my family has always dealt with adult obesity, and I am struggling with that myself. And so I don't want my kids to struggle with that. And so sometimes that affects how I parent them, good and bad. And so I have to be aware of that. So how do family health issues like smoking, obesity, substance abuse, and the list goes on, how do those affect family relationships? Also think about depression and suicide and how those types of internalizing behaviors might affect families moving forward. So be able to talk really just about family health and some of the uh, things that are due to the way that we live our lives and how those impact families that we are going to be working with. And that is your chapter 12 Quick Hit.